as people start returning to the workplace, not returning to work, because we all have been working, it's returning to working in the workplace. There's a lot of employers that are saying, let's rush to work, let's rush to return to work. And that is happening with events too. So that is important because there might be meetings or social events the workplace is holding, and they want people to come back. And they have to still do these same accommodations and requirements for employees. So if an employee says, I need an accommodation, and that means to be remote or telecommute, these standards still apply. And they still need to pay very close attention to them. They still need to engage in the interactive process. They still need to not discriminate against someone. They still need to watch very carefully. Just because you're excited to return to work, you do not alienate against someone because of that. And you don't have a blanket policy that everyone returns because you're excited to return. You work with people. We could have a whole session on that. Next slide, please. Now, where this is more concerning and more confusing is a lot of us, let's say in our field, but this is true in lots of fields. They, we sign up for an MCLE, we sign up to an event. We are customers, we are accessing it not as so much as an employee. So there are a lot of crossovers. But here it's more as a customer, a vendor, we should be having access. You need to provide access to someone who may be not able to attend in person. And you want to provide that remote access. You need to make sure that they're accessible as well. Traditionally it's ramps and parking. Now we need to make sure we have that access. The one law that most people default, it's not the only, there is a lot more, is ADA Title III. And what I would like to point out here is some language about what is appropriate accommodation that you'll see in section A, B, and C. B, I'm not going to do too much detail because Jeffrey's going to do a great job of talking about some of these aids and services. But it's important that they're making access, and you can see that it has to be effective communication and public access settings. Let's go to the next one. I chose the Domino's case to talk to you about because it's really kind of an easy, understandable case. This is a case where someone tried to access the Domino's website to order food, and they couldn't because the website was not up to date under the ADA, and it didn't translate well. It did not have effective communication. It did not allow everyone to access the website and everyone the means to properly communicate. That's accessible electronic information and technology for everyone. Other effective methods of making visual delivery materials available to individuals who are blind or have low vision. So there are very clear standards on what that should be, and it was not made accessible. And it was found that that does not provide a place for public accommodation. So that was a $4,000 fine for each attempt. So we're not talking about a small matter here. You're denying someone access to your business. Just like if you made it that there was a row of steps and someone who had incapable of walking couldn't get up those steps. So it's the same concept. You have to make it accessible to get into your website, accessible to get into your event. It's the same concept, just now more in a technological availability. And that is the same under California law. I chose this case because I really want everyone to understand it's the same concepts. If you don't make people able to get into your website, you don't make it able for them to register for your event, and you don't make them able to attend your event, then you've denied access. It is the same as you can't, the elevator doesn't work at BART. I'm not picking on BART, but it's an example. And then if you can't get down to the train, you can never get on the train. No questions? Okay.
All right.
Yeah, go please.
Oh, it's me. Okay. So, and another quite just very practical reason we're focusing a bit on websites is, as most of us on this Zoom call are attorneys, and if you've been monitoring at all the new case filings, particularly in the Bay Area, you have probably seen that there are some factory law firms that typically file these accessibility cases. And they first started out, and they're still doing this with the sort of quote unquote traditional accessibility cases we've talked about with, ramps and disabled parking and accessibility, like physical accessibility. But there are now these same firms or other firms who are, again, basically a factory churning out these lawsuits, filing complaints against businesses like Domino's, in the example Beth said, for website accessibility. And you'll see on here that it's protected, or the law that applies is both the ADA and the California Unrest Civil Rights Act, for the exact reasons Beth mentioned in the previous slide. And it most commonly impacts those who have vision problems, since websites are primarily a visual tool to register for events and so forth. But that's not the only type of accessibility, but primarily vision related issues for website access. And you'll see in the slide towards the bottom that the number of these kinds of website accessibility lawsuits has increased over 200% just in 4 years. And I don't, my firm and I, we handle these as well on the defense side, and it has really been, it has skyrocketed in the last few years, and Safar Shah's tracker also confirms that. And so it's not just us opining about it, it's really practically out there in the plaintiff's bar. All right. So we touched upon some of these already with our examples, but why are websites so important? Well, on a very basic level, every business that has a website, not every business has a website, so that's one thing. But if you do have a website, then there are guidelines and requirements you need to have. It's sort of like if a company offers vacation, again, they don't have to offer vacation, but once they do, there are all sorts of bells and whistles that go with it. Well, same with a website. If a customer or if a client or a business wants to have a website, then they need to have all sorts of bells and whistles. So they're promoting their company through their website. Particular with hybrid events, they are probably directing, on their flyers, on their email communications, on their LinkedIn posts, whatever they do to drum up business or PR, there probably is a link back to registration through a company website or through an Evite or something like that. And then if someone can't get into that website, or they can't read it, or their vision, the website isn't set up so that they, the colors are off or whatever it might be, then they can't register. And as Beth mentioned, then they're prohibited. They're essentially locked out of going to the event, which is an access problem. We'll talk more mainly with Jeff about how to remedy some of these situations with some good best practices as well. But that's why, again, websites, not exactly a hybrid event, but it is the gateway to many of these hybrid events. So, here I think Beth and Julianne can chime in on these, but we put together this list of some thoughts of what accessibility really means in a hybrid or an online event situation. So like on Zoom, you can select closed captioning or auto captioning, so that if you have that feature turned on, obviously it doesn't know what words I'm saying, but once I say them, they caption it, just like if it were a newscast on TV. They don't always get everything correct, probably because I can't enunciate, but if you have that on, then it is helpful to those who have a hearing difficulty. But this chart, or this list, really is not all inclusive, but it is definitely a good start for consideration if you're hosting or if your firm has hybrid events or strictly online events, for example. Beth, Julianne, or Jeff, you want to mention or point out any of these in particular?
No, I think what was really important is that Sherry, whose last name is escaping me, I don't know if it's Sherry Rita is actually your last name or you're posting as, brought up a really great point, is that even with having some of these platforms working with them, they're not all accessible. Like Zoom right now is quite horrible for closed caption. And we don't actually have it with this setting. And that's not great planning, and it is horrible. A lot of the different technology platforms are getting better, but it isn't really the only thing we should do. And so I have some helpful hints in here about how we plan for that, but they are just one of the things we have to deal with and to do it correctly. And that just highlights how much work this is. I mean, we have a presentation on this and we don't have all the answers.
Yeah, that's correct.
Go
I
ahead,
would agree.
Jesse.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of these, and I'll talk about this in my section, but a lot of these folks are really scrambling to start to add some of these services in, or you need third-party add-ins to get functionality into the product. So there's a lot of changes going on, but stuff is coming, but the answers aren't all there yet.
Thanks, Jeff and Beth. Appreciate it. All right, Jeff, well, perfect segue to your section.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was. So it's like we planned it or something. So yeah, there's a lot of these platforms that are available for us to use and that have helped keep everyone sort of working together during this interesting time in COVID history. So with all the bad news that we've heard during the last year and a half, 2 years almost, I think that this portion of it has actually been sort of a blessing that's come out of it, and it's brought people together in ways that don't have to be in person, or can be a combination of different ways that people can attend and communicate and continue to work together. And with that has come a lot of shortcomings in them, as we have just mentioned, closed captioning for one. I was doing some research and reading on this, and it seems that every single one of these providers requires a third-party add-in in order to provide closed captioning. To me, is terrible. Like, that should be there. If we're all there virtually, then we should be able to provide that. They're all running at it as quickly as they can to build that into their products. And there's a variety of different shortcomings in a lot of these products that anyone that's tried to turn on closed captioning, for instance, will see and find out. But they're all working really hard to get that edge and get that business and keep that business. So while you see and feel those day to day, it is starting to change. So if you're starting to plan an event and looking to choose a platform, make sure that you're understanding your audience and who's out there and plan for it. Make sure that you've got an effective platform that meets the needs of those folks, and make sure that those services are available, or that you reach an arm out to find the add-in or service capability that will provide the extra steps that you need to make sure that everybody's comfortable. You know, again, a lot of this industry is changing. I think the push that we got during COVID really helped to develop and mature a lot of these products in a capacity that I don't think anybody foresaw. So there's a lot of business dealings going on between Zoom and Ring Central. Microsoft is making some incredible headway with Teams in the market. And then some of the other products are continuing to keep their sort of foundational cornerstones that they've earned and developed. But I foresee some market consolidation around these as they work to advance their own products. You know, as we've seen in the past, Microsoft buys everybody if they need to shore up a solution somewhere. So I think it's only a matter of time before a lot of these things that we're like, why isn't this already here, will be there. I certainly think that they are all making extravagant efforts to get there, and their customers and markets are demanding it. So making sure that you're planning and looking at that ahead of it and building the requirements in is by far the number one important thing that you look at when prepping for meetings. The next slide. So when you're setting up a meeting, make sure that you have capacity to, of course, obvious, to host folks that can attend virtually, and that you've got technology that can support not only the speaker presenting, the moderator, and the audience. So what you would see typically in a more modern office scenario that's supporting a hybrid event would be split screens that can do moderator, speaker, so that the software has the ability to switch automatically to between the speaker and the host, or the moderator, or people that are actively speaking. And then another shot that can show the conference room at large and who's attending, and so that somebody attending virtually can see everybody. Everyone is appearing on the screen, and that there's space to share content. So making sure that you've got the whole picture when you're looking at it remotely and not able to attend in person, so you really understand what's happening in the room and that you're a part of it. That ability of the software to focus between who's speaking, who's listening, and then a platform for questions and answers. We're using the chat a lot in this conversation today to sort of go back and forth while one of us is rattling on about some of these issues. But it's a really important point in being able to include people that are not physically present. So a lot of those are things that are happening. And if you're in a third party meeting room or something, make sure that you've got those options available. Like we've talked to Julianne about some technology that can support hybrid events in the future with the bar association here. And it was simply just making sure that there's camera access and that there's good ways to leverage the software that can be put on those to make sure that those in-person events are freely accessible for folks that need to attend virtually and have that need. What other questions can I answer from a technology standpoint that can help clarify this? I'm happy to discuss.
Go ahead.
Jeffrey, one thing I wanted you to cover is, and you talked about how people that are attending virtually would be able to see the speaker and the attendees. And then it's also true that the technology that we're looking at, so that people at the conference would also see everyone else that's quote zooming in, so that
Yeah.
you're really included and can interact simultaneously. It's an interactive.
Correct. Yeah. So just like we see here with everybody attending that has cameras and they're enabled. Like if you have a camera and it's turned on and enabled, then you're able to be on the screen and participate in that group view. But there's a speaker view that you can enable where the active speaker becomes the primary focus of the screen, and then the attendees are sort of in a panel view, like sort of a Hollywood Square setup, so that you can see everybody while the active speaker is taking the focus on the screen as well as content. So there's a lot of functionality that's available. It's not perfect. As a technology person that hears feedback on a lot of these issues and tries to find solutions for a lot of them, there's still a lot of shortcomings, but I can tell you that they are actively working on a lot of these issues to make it work well for everyone. Will they all hit the mark? I don't know, but we can only hope, right? So social events, I think, is coming up in the Q&A, and that also is that's an interesting question. I've hosted social events during COVID. They've really been fun because everybody's sort of casual in their own space, and enjoying some time with each other to network and chat. And it's really been, I think those conversations and those events have really been a lot more personal in the conversations, because it's kind of like, you know, you're not just separated into cliques in a in-person event as you would, because there's noise and you have to huddle sort of to have conversation, but to just host a meeting and have everybody be online and sharing time together, like, has been really, really special. Yeah, hybrid social. So it's really, you know, there's additional steps that you can take if you've got some budget that allows it, to send out packages to, you know, for people to do a drink mix or a cookie recipe or something that you can work together with to share during the social, or there's even escape room things, and there's a whole host of social events that you can do with folks online that would be interesting to look at. But I know the social event aspect of the virtual platforms have really been successful and worked really well in my experience, just because of the inability for people to separate and have one-on-one conversations.
So with the, how would
Yeah,
that
real
work
quick.
with the
Yeah,
hybrid?
yeah, Julianne, can I just address what Tilia was asking about, is hybrid social events? So for example,
Right.
I went to one where I went virtually, where there was about 30 or 40 people in the room, and then the rest of us could appear virtually, and the people virtually could interact, and we could see the people in present who were interacting. But the only way people present
Yeah.
could interact with us were if they got on one designated computer and type with us in the chat. And then
Yeah,
they
and that's
printed out
not
the
a great solution technology wise, and I don't think there is a good integration there yet. I think if you you know, in a stay-at-home option, you know, sometimes social events are best to do, you know, either completely online, or to keep everybody sort of integrated. It's difficult. I don't think there's a good answer for it yet. There really isn't, because it makes things awkward. The technology isn't filling the gap completely.
So one idea that we had experimented with, not that we've done this, but one idea we were talking about was having like a separate room. So like, imagine a holiday party, and you have your room with everyone visiting and around the table drinking and having their cocktails and food, and then you have a side room that has the technology set up, and so people that are zooming in are there, and then you tell people, hey, here's the room, if you want to go and chat with these people. So you're chatting just like you'd be mingling, right? Like you pick who you're going to mingle with socially. So and then that would be the way to mingle. And you'd have to have a separate room with the cameras, and that way it wouldn't be noisy. You would hear, and people would be conversing. And I don't think that's that much different than when you're at a in-person social holiday party. You're not talking to everyone all at once anyway. You're picking and choosing what group you're going to talk with. So that would be one idea to try that.
Yeah, I think it's going to take some experimentation and some you know, pushing of the topic to sort of find solutions that work for different groups and different opportunities. I don't you know, this is kind of a period of time in social events, certainly, where we've got to figure it out. But making it accessible and making you know, making attempts to try to figure it out, to make people at least feel like they have an opportunity to participate, I think is the key there. And if it's a separate room, or if it's, you know, walking up and speaking, I don't know if a typing in the middle of something is effective, or if speaking might be better. It's hard, you know, it's going to depend on the event and the noise levels and all of the different access points that are needed to make that happen.
I'm not on the camera, but look. You see it? Right here.
Oh, sorry. I thought someone was talking to us. So I have found, and I would love to see how people have found in their experiences and feedback, that there is a dramatic difference between virtual events for meetings and presentations. Presentations obviously much easier with one or two people speaking at people. Meetings where there is, people can raise hands and go in an orderly fashions versus social events, and social events being much more difficult to engage. But I was wondering if anyone had any suggestions of platforms that they found were easier for presentations and or meetings. And so I'd love everyone's feedback, and so we can share with people. I have actually found that Zoom was difficult for some things, but
yeah, there's also a question about ASL translation, and yeah, there are settings in there available to bring the translator forward for folks that need ASL for sure.
So yeah, so Monica, so I've been on several presentations where you highlight the ASL translator. I think that's what you're asking. And you can pick several people who are, so if it's myself and James are speaking, and then you can always have the ASL translator dinged as one of the speakers. So their screen is always highlighted. Interestingly enough, in a few of those presentations I've been on, some people have identified that due to their disability, the ASL translator is actually problematic for them. So they can close that screen for them themselves, or we can close that screen for them. So there's all sorts of things that you can do to help and accommodate people. And so that actually was easy enough in Zoom.
Hey, Jeff, we've talked a lot about, sort of software or applications that are currently in development or need to be developed. But are there any sort of hardware equipment type things that, particularly employers, we couldn't send guests, a better camera or things like that. But are there sort of hardware type tools or items that employers should consider sending to those who need or want more accessibility?
Sure. I mean, cameras nowadays are on everything, practically, right? So, and if you have a device that doesn't have a camera on it, attaching one is a very simple and low cost solution that definitely can be worked out. iPads, iPhones, and other mobile device handheld accessories provide really good sources for cameras to use on these meetings as well, and are pretty effective for camera use. Hardware in general, I think, it's going to depend on the needs of the person that needs to use it. That's going to be able to classify that. But there are so many devices that are on the market, and I'm not saying they're going to fix it for everybody, but I think that access has definitely changed in that realm over the last decade, and given people more choices to select from for something that can help them work well together.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, thank you.
Less infrastructure, big sort of hard solutions that have been sort of made a one size fits all for everybody. It's really become down to the consumer end, where it really depends on what you need and what works well for you, that you can really help to shore that end of it up.
All right.
I agree with the virtual backgrounds. I don't like them, but from people that use, no offense, James, but people that use them, they sometimes need privacy from their end, and we're all working in a different environment than we did before, and sometimes you may be working in a space with 2 or 3 other people, and space is a premium in the Bay Area, and we've got to figure out ways to share some of that workspace when sheltering. And so those virtual backgrounds are important for some people in order to maintain their an ethical wall of sorts from their personal lives. So
I agree completely.
Shield or something. So
yeah,
we've got to make accommodations there, I think, for people that need them and want to use them. So
absolutely. I agree completely. I mean, even just those of you who have children who are in school and had to do hybrid learning or remote learning, I mean, there are some kids who just were embarrassed because they had posters on their walls of things that they didn't want their classmates to see, or just not a great home situation. And the same goes for adults, right? I mean, I use a virtual background mainly because the way my office is set up is I have a big window behind me, and I would be a dark silhouette if I had nothing, and I have to close everything and turn off all the lights. So anyway, I totally agree.
I have skylights above me, and as the sun starts to go in the afternoon, I start to fade to white. So I understand the sunshine issue. There was another question about vax proof for events. I was at the Legal Technology Association conference in Las Vegas at the end of August, and they required everyone in attendance to show proof of vax. So I think that, in attendance, and in California, we've got some help in asking for that is defensible. So
All right. Beth, I think this is one of your slides, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone knows me and actually has been paying attention to my little comments in the chat, I'm a big pusher of information that I would like people to take into consideration when they plan events, when they work with others. So interacting effectively and respecting others with disability is not just about being legal or engaging illegally. It's about the spirit of the ADA, the FEHA. It's good business sense. And so here are some additional tips. Ask before you help. Just because someone has a disability, don't assume they need your help. Don't assume you know what help they need. Adults with disabilities in accessible spaces want to be treated as independent people. I really is an important tidbit fact that we pointed out here is that 1 in 4 US adults, that's 61 million Americans, and 1 in 4 US adults in California, that's over 7 million, are disabled. This is a big population. And right now, the largest number of charges in the 2019 DFEH statistics under employment and housing is disability. I mean, I can't underscore enough how much this is really part of our everyday life, and it is not talked about enough. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not as interesting, maybe it doesn't create as many stories, I don't know. But it is truly important that we recognize it is part of our lives in every shape and form, and is one of the largest growing classifications as well under the FEHA. It's in large part because our population is aging, so they're aging into disability. So please don't assume you know someone's disability and then assume what they need as an accommodation. So ask before you help. Think before you speak. Oh, that's a tough one for me. I get it. It's not easy, but think before you speak. Always speak directly to the person with a disability, not their companion, not their sign language person, while we respect their privacy. And that can be hard, but definitely do not speak to their companion. Don't make assumptions. People with disabilities are the best judge of what they can and cannot do. Don't make decisions for them about participating in an activity. Depending on the situation, if you do that, you could actually violate the law and violate their rights. Respond graciously to requests. When people who have disabilities ask for an accommodation, this is not a complaint. Asking for an accommodation is not a complaint or an attack on you or your business. It shows that someone feels comfortable enough to ask for what they need. It's a positive response will further the good working relationship. Any questions on any of that? No. Okay, next slide.
And just quickly, I just want to apologize for any ungracious comment that I may have made.
Oh, what did I miss? It's usually me who says something, so thank you. Okay, so put the person first. We often use the concept that language matters. So say a person with a disability rather than disabled person, or people with disabilities rather than the disabled. Avoid negative disempowering words like suffer or victim. Say a person with cancer instead of person who suffers from cancer. Keep in mind, everyone has their own personal preferences. I just gave you terms and I could be wrong, because even though we are trying to use our language carefully, someone may say to you, actually, I prefer to say it this way about myself. So if you're not certain, or if a person tells you they prefer a different way, then you'd use the language that person decides they want for themselves. And not all disabilities are apparent, even though there are disabilities that are hidden, they are real. So again, this is another one of those areas where we say that it is not always something you can see. Don't assume and make decisions for others. Communicate with them and let them come to you. It's not an attack. When they ask for an accommodation, work with them.
So
I know it's a lot.
I wanted to jump in here and add, when you on the previous slide, Beth, don't make assumptions. Just as an example, one of the things that's really difficult for people to understand most of the time, sometimes when you see someone, when you look at me today, I look fine to you, and I am feeling fine right now. So I'm, let's say I'm out and about. Let's say we're even at an event together, and I'm acting fine and interacting with you. And then let's say that we have a meeting scheduled for 4 o'clock that afternoon with opposing counsel on a case. And I text you at 3:45 and I say, can't make it, not doing well. A lot of times the assumptions are, hey, I just saw you an hour ago. You were fine. That's one of the assumptions that people with invisible disabilities are constantly fighting against. So that's just one thing I would add to the assumption comment there. And I had another comment that, of course, has gone out of my brain. Just a moment, I'll think about it here. It was something you said, Beth.
I always thought that happened to me.
Oh no, it happened to you. Not just you. Oh, I wanted to give an example of a way to be inclusive. When Beth was mentioning, you know, ask before you help, etc. So it's very, it's easy to feel isolated and not included, and not a part of the regular world when you can't attend events all the time. And so there are certain things that just like without even commenting or asking, that just can, you know, make you feel included. I mean, I just want to give a quick example. Our firm had an event a couple of weeks ago. It was at a restaurant, an indoor restaurant. I still am not allowed to go to indoor restaurants, so I couldn't go. That day I picked up my mail at my home, and there was a card in the mail from my firm that said something, you know, we will miss you, whatever it said, with a gift card inside, since I couldn't attend the dinner. So that's just an example. Even if there's not, Jeffrey commented earlier, there might not be perfect solutions to every social event or every activity, but sometimes little efforts, and it's the little things that can mean so much. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, acknowledgement goes a long way, right?
Totally. So I want to make sure we got to everyone's questions. Were there any other techie questions in particular? Because while we have Jeffrey, we want to get everything out of him we can. Any other tech questions?
You can find me on LinkedIn and through my email on the Trucker Huss website. If you've got stuff that comes up later, I'm happy to answer them. I may be gone, but I'm not lost. So
Okay,
if something comes up and you've got questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help.
Thank you.
I'm learning so much today about the background and the blur component. I had no idea.
Higher resolution monitors may help with some of the flickering portions of that. I know most of that is because of so you've got a resolution on the monitor that's presenting the speaker and the blur option, and then you've got the receiving monitor that's showing the blur or the image that's behind them, and then the internet that's in between. And for most of the time that we've been at home, that folks' home internet bandwidth has really been an instrumental portion of keeping people productive, but they've still got to push those bits across the wires and then represent them. So a higher resolution monitor will help display those images a little bit better, and making sure that you've got robust internet at home, which, you know, for some of us may not be accessible because there's costs associated with both of those, but you know, if you're at home working, there may be some assistance that you can get with that.
And I would assume a better camera would help as well.
The camera is not a factor so much as it is the resolution on the monitor and the internet speed. Is there there's a plane flying over?
Okay, and I just wanted to point out these other additional resources. Some of them actually not just about technology, but there's some information here about the physical accommodation space. We did focus, you know, primarily or only on technology here, but we wanted to make sure you had some links. Everything that was put in the chat today as to links and information, we'll also put into a hard copy document for you. If you have any other information or questions, please always make sure that you contact us. This is probably one of the most chatty MCLEs I've seen in about 4 or 5 months. So I appreciate that because I feel like we all have a bit of Zoom burnout. And I want to make sure that everyone is welcome to share any questions or comments they have. There is about 5 or 6 people who didn't put any comments or questions. And I'm not calling you out because that's your right not to say anything, but I do love when people have some feedback or questions. So welcome to send us comments or questions. We'll stay on for another 5 minutes or so. If people want to turn on their cameras and have some you know, face-to-face communications, they don't want to do it in the chat, or if they want to stay and ask questions. If not, we will thank you all for coming. Continue to encourage you to discuss these matters and enjoy yourselves and have a safe and wonderful week.
Yes,
Thank you,
thank you everyone for your participation.
So I had a quick question. How do you deal with blind, you know, people who don't have sight on a Zoom context? I mean, I get it with hybrid meetings, they could attend in person instead of on Zoom, but how do you deal with it? Because it's not clear to me. Are there things that, like, for example, convert the words to my headphones if I'm visually impaired?
Dictation through the closed captioning, I think, is a service that may be coming if there's not third-party add-in support for it already. The closed captioning can be reread with dictation. So it takes a little bit of work to get it working. And is it flawless? Of course not. But it can be done.
Yeah, so I work with a few people who have several software programs that do a translation. They even do a translation for, you know, describing a picture or the content of the presentation. But that's part of why it's really helpful that when people like us do our presentation, I identify myself. I should have done a better job. I should have said, hi, this is Beth Mora speaking, or now this is Beth Mora. So it made it easier for people not to wait for things to translate over. And even when we draft our presentations, we need to make it easier. So when it's translating over, it's easier for the images to be translated over, the content to be translated over for people.
And then someone put up a software or a link for Zoom. Is there a software now where it can take the words and put it into captions that people can read for people that have hearing
Yes.
disability?
Yes.
Yeah, and I've seen it on Zoom. I will say a few boards I work with use Google Meets, I want to say.
Yeah. Google Meet. Yeah.
And it's gotten much better. When I first would watch it, it was an auto translate, and it was terrible. And it's gotten, don't hold me to that. They're going to sue me, right? The computer heard that. That's my artificial intelligence joke. And then it's gotten much better. I would say, like, I saw it 2 days ago and I thought, wow, that really got it quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point too, about a recording a meeting and then listening or transcribing it afterwards with the content are other ways. That doesn't keep you included in the event itself, but it does give you access to the material and the attendees that were there, certainly.
Yeah, and Anne just made a great point, is after the Zoom meeting recording, one can get both the audio video recording and a transcript. It is really wonderful to have those things. One of the other things that's really good is, I think Sherry was somewhat making this point, but if you're going a little slower, you're identifying yourself. This is Beth again, going a little slower. It is helpful not just for the software to translate. It's also helpful for some people that due to their disability, they may need to take notes. There may be someone with a sign language person, an ASL person doing sign language. You want everyone to have their time to catch up, everyone to have the time for their needs to be met. So sometimes just identifying yourself, which I'm terrible at, I'm just not good at it, and I need to work on it. There's things you need to do that going slow, it helps a lot of people in different ways.
Yeah, hi, this is Jeff. I agree. Taking the moment to just say, hi, this is Jeff, it is really helpful for people. And sometimes we just get going too fast. And but I agree, Beth. Thank you.
That was just your opinion. Yeah, Marcia, I didn't follow that. I'm sorry. But okay, any other questions?
Well, yeah, I think it's 1 o'clock, and I just want to say this has been a very engaging group, and I'm super happy that you guys all joined us. If there's anyone that is interested in joining our subcommittee on disability rights for CCBA, please shoot me an email. Our contact information is on the very last slide of the PowerPoint. Giammona at ferberlaw.com. We'd welcome anyone else that would like to join us. And it seems like we had a great discussion, and there may be some people here that could be very helpful on our committee. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate your presence. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.